Pay for cutting off my parents after they gave my wedding fund to my sister? I'm Taylor, 27, and I've been the daughter my family calls responsible whenever they need me to absorb something unfair. My parents, Sharon and Richard, have always treated my younger sister Brooke like she was one bad day away from falling apart. I was expected to be fine no matter what happened. If Brooke forgot a birthday, she was overwhelmed. If she borrowed money and didn't repay it, she was struggling. If I said no to anything, I was being cold. I'm engaged to Jonah, who is 29 and has spent the last 3 years watching me turn family emergencies into monthly expenses. He also knows I keep receipts for everything. One of our kitchen drawers is basically a graveyard of old invoices, Venmo notes, printed confirmations, and sticky notes I meant to throw away. I used to think that made me organized. By the end of this story, that paper trail made it impossible for my family to rewrite what they did. The engagement dinner had been planned for almost a month. I made the reservation myself and added it to the shared family calendar. It was supposed to be simple. My parents, Brooke, my Aunt Lila, a few cousins, and Jonah's parents. Nothing formal. Just dinner, a toast, and a chance for the two sides of the family to meet before wedding planning got serious. My parents had been talking about helping with my wedding since Jonah and I got engaged. It was never a legal agreement. There was no trust, no contract, no special account in my name. My parents had simply told us, at a family dinner and again in several text messages, that they had set aside $18,000 for my wedding. My mother had written, "We want you to have the day you deserve." My father had added, "You've never asked us for much. Let us do this." I believed them because, despite everything, I wanted to believe that this was one area where I wouldn't be asked to step aside for Brooke. A week before the engagement dinner, Jonah and I placed a deposit on a venue. We chose something modest enough that we could cover most of it ourselves, but the promised money would have let us invite more relatives and avoid putting anything on credit. I forwarded my mother the venue confirmation. She replied with 3 heart emojis and, "So exciting." That mattered later. The night of the dinner, Jonah and I arrived first. The restaurant had pushed 2 long tables together near the back. There were little candles in glass holders and folded paper menus at each seat. My Aunt Lila brought flowers. Jonah's mother hugged me and said she had been looking forward to meeting everyone. Brooke arrived 20 minutes late. She was wearing a new cream-colored coat and carrying a designer purse I had never seen before. Her eyes were slightly red, but I assumed she had been crying in the car or arguing with someone. With Brooke, there was always something. My mother kept touching her arm. "You okay, honey?" she asked. Brooke nodded and gave me a tight smile. "Yeah, just tired." I noticed my father wouldn't look at me. That should have warned me. Dinner started normally. People talked about wedding food, guest lists, and whether Jonah and I were going to have a band or a DJ. My mother asked Jonah's parents how they had met. My father ordered a second drink before the appetizers were cleared. Then, while the server was bringing out the main course, my mother tapped her spoon against her water glass. The conversation stopped. She stood with one hand pressed to her chest. "Before we celebrate," she said, "your father and I need to share something difficult." Jonah's hand rested against the back of my chair. My mother looked at me with the soft, sorrowful expression she uses when she has already decided I am going to disappoint her. "We have made a difficult but loving decision," she continued. "The money we had planned to contribute to Taylor's wedding is going to Brooke instead." For a few seconds nobody spoke. I honestly thought I had misunderstood her. My Aunt Lila lowered her fork. Jonah's father looked down at his plate. Brooke's eyes filled immediately, like she had been waiting for her cue. My mother went on. "Brooke needs a better start right now. Taylor has always been independent. She has Jonah and she is capable of handling this. Brooke needs her family more." My father finally looked at me. "You've always been able to stand on your own," he said. "We knew you would understand." I felt Jonah's hand move from the chair to the middle of my back. He didn't speak. He knew I needed to handle it. I looked at Brooke. She stared down at her napkin and whispered, "I didn't ask for this." But she didn't say she would refuse the money. She didn't look surprised. I turned back to my mother. "So you chose my engagement dinner to announce that my wedding money is going to Brooke?" My mother's mouth tightened. "Please don't call it your money. You promised it to us. We said we would help, she replied. Circumstances changed. Before or after I sent you the venue deposit? My father sighed like I was already exhausting him. Taylor, this is exactly why we wanted to discuss it with everyone here. We didn't want misunderstandings. That sentence told me everything. They hadn't wanted to discuss it with everyone. They wanted witnesses. They wanted a room full of relatives and future in-laws so I would be too embarrassed to react. My mother lowered her voice. Don't make this ugly. I looked around the table. Nobody knew where to put their eyes. Brooke dabbed at her face with a napkin. Jonah's mother looked furious on my behalf, which somehow made the humiliation worse. I could have yelled. I could have listed every time I had been expected to give something up for Brooke. I could have asked why her newest crisis always had a price tag. Instead, I picked up my purse. Jonah, are you ready to go? He stood immediately. My mother blinked. You're leaving? Yes. Taylor, sit down. You're making a scene. I'm not, I said. I'm leaving before you do. I found our server near the bar and asked her to separate the check for my meal and Jonah's. She looked confused because the reservation was under my name, but she did it. While I signed the receipt, my phone buzzed twice. The first message was from my father. Please come back to the table. The second was from my mother. You are embarrassing us in front of Jonah's family. I put my phone face down. When Jonah and I walked past the table, I thanked everyone for coming. My Aunt Lila started to stand, but my mother caught her wrist and said, "Let her cool down." Brooke didn't say anything. Outside, the air was cold enough that my eyes watered before I even reached the car. I climbed into the passenger seat with a takeout box on my lap, because the server had packed the food I had barely touched. Jonah got behind the wheel. He didn't start the car right away. For almost a minute, neither of us spoke. My phone kept buzzing inside my purse. Finally, Jonah asked, "Do you want me to say something or do you want silence?" "Silence for now." He nodded and started driving. Halfway home, I said, "The money hurts less than the timing." I know. They could have told me any other day. They could have called. They could have come over. They wanted witnesses. Jonah kept his eyes on the road. Then don't respond like you're alone. I looked at him. He added, "I'm here. But this is your call." By the time we got home, I had 9 missed calls. 3 were from my mother, 2 from my father, 1 from Brooke, and the rest were from relatives who had still been sitting at the table. I changed out of my dress and sat at the kitchen counter while Jonah heated the food we had brought home. My engagement ring felt strangely heavy on my hand. My mother left a voicemail. Her voice was tight and wounded. "I don't know who you're becoming, Taylor. We tried to handle a sensitive family matter with love, and you humiliated your sister in front of everyone. Please call me when you're ready to behave like an adult." My father texted next. "Call Brooke and apologize. She is devastated. You're the mature one. Just let it go." Then Brooke sent me a paragraph. "I didn't even ask for this. Mom and Dad made the decision because they're worried about me. You made me feel like a charity case in front of Jonah's family. I hope you're happy." I read it twice. Then I let out a single humorless laugh. Jonah set a plate in front of me. "What?" "She's upset that I made her feel like a charity case after accepting my wedding money at my engagement dinner." "Are you going to answer?" "Not yet." That was the first decision I made that night. For most of my adult life, I had responded immediately whenever my family wanted something. A late bill, a flat tire, a copay, a card that had been declined. I thought fast responses kept problems small. What they really did was train everyone to expect access to me. My mother had been praising me for being independent since I was a teenager, but the praise always came right before a request. "You're so good with money. Could you help with your father's car repair? You know Brooke gets anxious about bills. Could you cover this month and let her pay you later? You're the only one who understands how hard things are right now." It was always temporary. A temporary car payment. A temporary credit card minimum. A temporary medical copay. A temporary utility bill. A temporary loan for Brooke that became rude to mention after 2 weeks. The amounts were often small enough to seem petty if I objected. $80 here. $200 there. $400 when Brooke's car was supposedly about to be repossessed. $130 for my mother's copay. $600 toward a card balance my father swore had gotten out of hand because of a billing error. I had used money to avoid arguments. That night I opened my banking app. I searched my transfers for my mother's name first, then my father's, then Brooke's. The list kept going. Zelle notes said things like Mom Copay, Car Help, Credit Card Min, and Brooke Temp Loan. My Venmo history had payments with pizza emojis or heart emojis attached to requests for expenses that weren't fun at all. I opened my credit card statements and found the payments I had made directly to my parents' accounts. Then I checked the recurring charges. I was covering my father's car payment through an automatic transfer. I was paying the minimum on one of my mother's credit cards. I was paying Brooke's car insurance because 6 months earlier, my mother had said Brooke would lose coverage during a rough patch. I was also covering a small monthly payment on a medical bill for my mother. None of those accounts were legally mine. None of the debts were in my name. I had simply added my payment information because each crisis had been presented as a one-time emergency. Jonah sat beside me while I wrote the amounts on a yellow legal pad. After 20 minutes he asked, "Why are they taking wedding money away from you while still letting you pay their bills?" I stared at the page. Because I taught them I'd rather pay than fight. The number at the bottom surprised me. Over the previous 18 months, I had paid $11,460 toward family expenses. That didn't include cash, groceries, dinners, or things I had bought without keeping track. I looked at the number again. My mother had announced in front of a room full of people that I didn't need family support because I could stand on my own. She had said it while my money was still scheduled to leave my account for her household. I opened the first autopay. My finger hovered over the cancel button. For a second I felt guilty. Then I remembered my mother telling me not to call the wedding fund my money, while treating my checking account like a shared family resource. I canceled the transfer. Then the next one. Then Brooke's insurance payment. Then the credit card minimum. I removed my saved payment information wherever I could and took screenshots of every confirmation page. The cancellation emails started appearing in my inbox. Recurring payment canceled. Automatic transfer disabled. Saved payment method removed. When I finished, I sent one message to my parents and Brooke. Since I'm mature enough to fund myself, I'm sure everyone else is mature enough to fund themselves too. I have canceled all payments for expenses that are not legally mine. Do not use my banking information again. My father called immediately. I let it ring. My mother called 30 seconds later. I let that one ring too. Then Brooke texted, "What does this mean about my insurance?" I replied, "It means you need to pay it." She sent back, "Are you serious?" I didn't answer. The next morning, my mother had moved from wounded to furious. She sent me a voice message before 7 a.m. "You cannot shut off help without warning. Your father's payment is due next week. Brooke needs her car to get around. This is retaliation, Taylor, and it is cruel." I listened while making coffee. Then I saved the message. My father wrote, "This could have been handled privately." I almost replied that they had given away my wedding fund publicly, but I decided not to waste that line yet. Brooke posted a vague quote on social media about people showing their true colors when money was involved. She added a broken heart emoji. By lunchtime, Aunt Lila called. I hesitated before answering because she had stayed at the restaurant after I left. "Hi, Taylor," she said carefully. "Your mom told me you shut off some kind of financial help overnight. Did she say what help?" There was a pause. "She said you were helping with a few temporary things." "Did she say how many?" "No." "Did she say I've paid more than $11,000 in the last year and a half?" Another pause. "No." I could hear her moving into a quieter room. "Taylor, I'm not calling to attack you. I know. But I need you to understand that this isn't me throwing a fit over a wedding. She says you're punishing them because they had to make a difficult decision. They made the decision. I made mine." Aunt Lila sighed. "Your mother is very upset." I was upset too. She just chose a restaurant full of people to make sure I couldn't show it. That call was the beginning of the family campaign. My mother contacted relatives before I did. By that afternoon, 2 cousins had sent me awkward messages asking whether I was really cutting off my parents because I didn't get the wedding I wanted. One older relative wrote, "Family is more important than a party." My father told people Jonah had changed me. Brooke told people I was making her feel guilty for needing help. My mother told everyone she had been trying to protect both daughters, and that I had responded by putting the whole family in financial danger. I didn't make a public post. I didn't send angry group messages. I saved everything. That night, I went through older texts because something about my mother's explanation didn't make sense. At dinner, she had said Brooke needed a better start. She hadn't explained what that meant. There was no medical crisis, job loss, or emergency that I knew of. But in the weeks before the engagement dinner, my mother had become unusually insistent about certain payments. "Can you cover your dad's car one more month? Can you make the card minimum before Friday? Brooke's insurance is higher this month. She'll pay you back. Please don't ask her about it right now. She's under pressure." At the time, I had assumed my parents were stretched because of the wedding contribution. Now I wondered whether the wedding money had already been spent. Jonah sat across from me at the kitchen table, while I arranged printed statements by date. He picked up one of my mother's messages. "Why does she keep saying one more month? Because that sounds temporary." "No. I mean, why that month specifically?" I looked at him. He continued, "They knew they were giving the wedding money away. Why were they still asking you to cover everything right up until the dinner?" That was the first moment I suspected the announcement hadn't been a reaction to some sudden emergency. It had been a plan. 2 days later, Paige called me. Paige is my cousin. She is 26, avoids family conflict whenever possible, and usually responds to arguments by pretending she hasn't seen her phone. When I answered, she sounded nervous. "Are you alone?" "Jonah's here." "That's fine. I just didn't want your mom around." I sat up straighter. "What happened?" "I wasn't going to get involved," she said, "but they're making you sound insane." My stomach tightened. "Who is?" "Brooke. Your mom. Both of them." Paige sent me 6 screenshots. They came from a private text thread between Paige, Brooke, and my mother. It had originally been used to discuss a birthday gift for Aunt Lila. Apparently, Brooke and my mother had continued talking in it, forgetting Paige was still included. The first screenshot was dated 3 weeks before my engagement dinner. Brooke had written, "I can't cover all of this. The card is already maxed." My mother replied, "Your father and I will handle it. Do not panic." Brooke wrote, "What about Taylor's wedding money?" My mother answered, "We may have to use some of it. Don't tell Taylor yet." The next screenshot was from 2 days later. Brooke, "Can't Taylor just cover the car payment one more month? She won't even notice." My mother, "I already asked her. She said yes." Brooke, "See? She always comes around." Then came the message that made my hands shake. My mother had written, "We'll tell her after the engagement dinner starts. With everyone there, she won't make a scene." Brooke replied, "What if Jonah gets involved?" My mother answered, "Make it about how he changed her. Richard already agrees." I read that line 3 times. Richard already agrees. My father hadn't been dragged into a sudden decision. He had agreed to the strategy. The last screenshot showed the actual reason for Brooke's crisis. She had accumulated more than $24,000 in personal debt through shopping, missed payments, buy now pay later accounts, and unpaid bills. She had also made several unauthorized charges on my mother's credit card, planning to replace the money before anyone noticed. She hadn't replaced it. My parents found out when the card was declined. According to the messages, the money promised for my wedding would cover part of Brooke's debt and bring my mother's card current. My parents had planned to keep me paying their existing bills, while they used the wedding fund to clean up Brooke's mess. Paige stayed quiet while I read. Finally, I asked, "How long have you had these?" "Since before the dinner." "Why didn't you send them then?" Her voice cracked slightly. "I thought your mom would tell you privately first. Then at the dinner, everything happened so fast. Afterward, she kept saying Brooke was in some emergency, and I thought maybe there was more to it. There wasn't." "I know. I'm sorry." I believed her. Paige wasn't responsible for my mother's choices. She had also grown up in the same family system, where getting involved meant becoming the next target. She added, Brooke told me yesterday you would get over it like always. That sentence hurt more than the debt amount. Not because it surprised me. Because it didn't. I thanked Paige and asked her to send the screenshots as original files, not cropped images. I saved them in 2 places and printed copies. Jonah stood at the counter, reading over my shoulder. He looked angrier than I had ever seen him. They planned the dinner. Yes. They planned to use the room against you. Yes. And your dad knew. Yes. He took a slow breath. What do you want to do? I looked at the pile of bank statements, cancellation confirmations, texts, and payment histories. I want them to stop telling my story for me. That night I built a timeline. I titled it, The Help They Forgot to Mention. I didn't use insults. I didn't call Brooke spoiled. I didn't call my mother manipulative. I didn't diagnose anyone. I listed dates. I listed amounts. I listed what each payment covered. I printed the text where my parents promised the wedding contribution. I printed the venue deposit email my mother had celebrated after she already knew she planned to redirect the money. I included the total I had paid over 18 months. I included the cancellation confirmation so nobody could claim I had tampered with accounts or taken money that belonged to them. Then I included the screenshots Paige sent. Jonah read everything. Take out this sentence, he said, pointing to a line where I had written that Brooke never intended to repay anyone. Why? You can't prove intent. You can prove she didn't repay you. He was right. I changed it. Keep it factual, he said. Let them argue with dates. For the next several days, the effects of the canceled payments began to hit. My father texted me a screenshot of a payment reminder. Your transfer didn't go through. I replied, correct. My mother wrote, we need to talk before late fees start. I answered, you need to contact the companies you owe. Brooke called me 6 times in one afternoon. When I finally answered, she was crying. My insurance payment is due. I know. I can't cover all of it. Then call the company and ask about your options. You know I hate making those calls. I hated being humiliated at my engagement dinner. That's not the same thing. No, it isn't. She stopped crying long enough for her voice to sharpen. You're really going to punish me for needing help? I'm not punishing you. I'm no longer paying for you. I didn't ask Mom to give me your wedding money. You knew before I did. Silence. Then she said, Paige showed you. It wasn't a question. Yes. Brooke exhaled hard. That was private. So was my money until you made me defend myself. You don't understand how bad things are. I understand that you spent money you didn't have and charged things to Mom's card without permission. I was going to fix it. With my wedding fund? She hung up. My mother called less than 5 minutes later. What did you say to your sister? The truth. She is having a panic attack. Then help her contact a professional. I'm not paying a bill to end the conversation. My mother's voice dropped. This is not how family behaves. No. Announcing your plan in front of my future in-laws is not how family behaves. We were trying to protect both our daughters. Which part protected me? She didn't answer. Instead, she said, You're punishing us because we made one hard decision. You made several decisions. You decided Brooke's debt was my problem. You decided I would keep paying your bills. You decided to tell me in public because you thought I would be easier to control. That is a terrible thing to say. It's in your texts. Another silence. Then she whispered, Paige had no right. That was the closest she came to admitting the screenshots were real. The following Sunday, my mother invited me to brunch at Aunt Lila's house. Her message said, We need to clear the air as a family. No attacks. No drama. Just honesty. I knew it was an ambush because Aunt Lila called separately and sounded uncomfortable. Your mother asked me to host, she said. Who is coming? She listed my parents, Brooke, Paige, 3 older relatives and 2 cousins. A jury. Jonah asked whether I wanted him there. No, I said. They'll use you as an excuse. He nodded. I'll drive you. I can drive myself. I know. I'm still offering. I accepted. Before we left, I put the printed timeline in a plain envelope. No dramatic folder. No labels. Just paper. Jonah watched me check the pages one last time. You don't have to convince everyone, he said. I know. Then what's the goal? To make lying expensive. He gave me a small smile. That sounds like you. When we arrived, several cars were already parked outside Aunt Lila's house. Through the front window, I could see people seated in the living room and around the dining table. Coffee cups, casserole dishes, paper napkins. Everyone looked like they were waiting for a meeting to begin. Brooke was already crying. That almost impressed me. My mother stood when I entered. Thank you for coming. Her voice was gentle and formal. My father didn't stand. He rubbed both hands over his knees and stared at the floor. Aunt Lila hugged me. Paige sat near the wall looking miserable. I placed my envelope on the table and took an empty chair. My mother began before I had even taken off my coat. We just want everyone to hear each other. Good, I said. I brought what everyone should hear. Her eyes moved to the envelope. What is that? Later. Aunt Lila poured me coffee. Her hands were tense. My mother sat beside Brooke and placed an arm around her shoulders. I asked everyone here because this has gone too far, she said. Taylor is angry that her father and I had to change our wedding contribution. In response, she shut off financial help without warning and has refused to speak respectfully to her sister. One of the older relatives looked at me. Is a wedding really worth destroying your family over? No, I said. My mother's face relaxed slightly. I continued. But I'm done letting them call it family when I'm the only one paying the bill. The room went still. My father sighed. This is exactly what I mean. This isn't who you were before you got engaged. I looked at him. No. This is who I was before I stopped paying for silence. He flinched. My mother pressed her lips together. Jonah has encouraged you to see everything as a transaction. Jonah told me to use facts. Brooke wiped her eyes. I never wanted to be in the middle. You weren't in the middle, I said. You were in the text thread. Her face changed. Only for a second, but everyone saw it. My mother interrupted quickly. Private messages taken out of context do not explain what Brooke has been going through. Then explain it. She has debt. How much? That is not everyone's business. You made it everyone's business when you used my engagement dinner to announce that you were giving her the money promised to me. My father leaned forward. This could have been handled privately. I met his eyes. You brought money into this at my engagement dinner. Aunt Lila set down the coffee pot. Sharon, maybe we should let Taylor finish. My mother looked offended. I am trying to explain what happened. You've been explaining it all week, I said. Now I am. I opened the envelope. I gave the first page to Aunt Lila and passed copies down the table. At the top was the title and the total. $11,460 in family expenses paid by me over 18 months. Below it were dates and descriptions. My father's car payment. My mother's card minimum. Brooke's insurance. Medical copays. Emergency transfers. Utilities. A repair bill. A credit card payment I had made after my mother told me the account had a billing error. People stopped looking at me and started reading. My mother didn't touch her copy. She stared at the table. I said, this doesn't include cash, groceries, dinners, or anything I didn't document. These are only payments I can prove. One cousin looked up. You paid their car payment every month? For 8 months. My father shifted in his chair. It was a temporary arrangement. It was scheduled to continue indefinitely. My Aunt Lila turned a page. What is this credit card payment? My mother told me she needed help because of a billing issue. My mother finally spoke. We did have a billing issue. I slid another page toward Lila. That's the payment history. I covered balances I didn't create. Brooke said, you're making it sound like nobody ever did anything for you. I'm showing what I did because you've all spent a week saying I abandoned this family. My mother's eyes filled with tears. We didn't ask you to keep records like this. No. You just kept asking me to pay. That line landed harder than I expected. One of the older relatives cleared his throat and looked away. I passed out the text messages where my parents promised the wedding fund. Then the venue deposit email. Then my mother's reply with the heart emojis. I said. By the time I sent that confirmation, they had already decided to redirect the money. They let Jonah and me place the deposit anyway. My father rubbed his forehead. We thought we could still work something out. No. You thought I would work it out. My mother shook her head. This is so misleading. I took out the screenshots from Paige. Brooke stood halfway up. Those are private. Paige spoke from the side of the room. They're real. Everyone turned toward her. Her face was pale but her voice was steady. I sent them to Taylor. My mother looked betrayed. Paige. I wasn't going to get involved, Paige said. But you were making her sound insane. Brooke sat back down. I read the first message aloud. We may have to use some of Taylor's wedding money. Don't tell Taylor yet. My mother started crying. I read the next one. Can't Taylor just cover the car payment one more month? She won't even notice. Aunt Lila looked at Brooke. Did you write that? Brooke's mouth opened then closed. I read my mother's message. We'll tell her after the engagement dinner starts. With everyone there, she won't make a scene. Nobody moved. My father stared at his hands. I finished with the final exchange. What if Jonah gets involved? And the answer was, make it about how he changed her. Richard already agrees. Aunt Lila looked at my father. You agreed to that? He didn't answer. My mother wiped her cheeks. We were scared. Brooke was in serious trouble. Then you should have told me she was in serious trouble, I said. You should have asked whether I was willing to help. Instead, you promised me money, let me make financial decisions based on that promise, and plan to keep using my account to cover everything else. We knew you would say no if you understood the full situation, my mother said. The room went quiet again. She seemed to realize too late what she had admitted. I nodded. Exactly. Brooke started crying harder. I made mistakes. I know that. But I was overwhelmed. Aunt Lila turned toward her. Did you charge things to your mother's card? Brooke looked at my mother. My mother said, that's not the point. Aunt Lila's voice sharpened. It is exactly the point. She held up the first page of my timeline. Then she asked my mother the question nobody else had asked. Did Taylor pay all of this? My mother's face tightened. She offered to help. That was not my question. My father said, Lila, enough. No, Lila replied. Did Taylor pay these expenses? My mother looked around the room. For the first time in my life, crying didn't immediately return control to her. She whispered, most of them. I pulled out the payment confirmations. All of them. Brooke pointed at me. You want everyone to hate me. No. I want everyone to stop calling me selfish for refusing to fund this. You always make me feel like a burden. I didn't say you were a burden. I said your debt is not mine. Paige spoke again. Brooke, you told me Taylor would get over it like always. Brooke turned on her. That was private. Paige shook her head. You knew exactly what was happening. My mother stood. This is cruel. Taylor came here prepared to humiliate us. I looked at her. You used an audience to make me look selfish. I'm using the same audience to show the receipt. My father pushed his chair back. Money should stay private. You announced the wedding money at a restaurant. That was different. Because you controlled the story? He didn't answer. The brunch fell apart after that. 2 relatives apologized to me quietly. One said she had only heard that I cut off my parents over a wedding contribution. Another admitted my mother had never mentioned how much I had been paying. A different relative told me I was right to stop the payments but wrong to expose private financial details. I said, they made public accusations. I gave a public defense. He didn't agree but he stopped arguing. Aunt Lila told my mother, you owe Taylor an apology. My mother said, after what she did here? Brooke left the table and locked herself in the bathroom. My father paced in the hallway, muttering that none of this would have happened if everyone had stayed calm. Paige sat beside me. I'm sorry I waited. You sent them when it mattered. Aunt Lila walked me to the door. I think we were told half a story, she said. You were told the half that cost them nothing. Outside, Jonah was waiting in the car. He didn't ask whether I had one. He looked at my face and said, How bad? Bad enough that they can't pretend they misunderstood. He drove us home. That evening my mother sent me a 6-minute voicemail. She said I had humiliated her, damaged Brooke's mental health, and turned relatives against the family. She said she didn't recognize me anymore. My father sent a shorter text. You proved your point. Can we move on now? Brooke wrote, You're really going to let me drown? I stared at that message for a long time. Then I replied, No, I'm letting you learn to swim without using me as a life raft. She sent back, Wow. I didn't respond. The next day I sent one final message to all three of them. I wrote that I would not restart any financial support. I would not pay Brooke's debts, my parents' recurring bills, late fees, insurance, card balances, or car payments. I also told my parents that attending the wedding would depend on 3 things. First, they needed to apologize privately to Jonah and me for using our engagement dinner to pressure us. Second, they needed to correct the story with the same relatives they had contacted. Third, they needed to stop claiming Jonah had changed me. For Brooke, future contact required her to stop asking for money, and either repay the direct loan she owed me or sign a written payment agreement with an amount she could actually manage. I ended the message with one sentence. I will not be the mature one if that means being the only one expected to lose. My mother did not reply for 4 days. My father wrote, These demands are extreme. I answered, Then don't meet them. The cancelled autopays created exactly the kind of chaos my family had always expected me to prevent. My father had to call the lender and make his own car payment. My mother had to contact her credit card company and arrange a payment plan. She paid a late fee because she waited too long, then told Aunt Lila the fee was my fault. Aunt Lila asked her, Was the bill in Taylor's name? That ended the conversation. Brooke could not keep all her expenses. She sold the designer purse she had carried to my engagement dinner, along with several pairs of shoes and a barely used exercise bike. She deleted her vague posts about loyalty after Paige replied to one with, Maybe don't make this public. My parents used the promised wedding money to reduce Brooke's debt and bring my mother's card current, but it wasn't enough to erase everything. Brooke still had to contact creditors and enroll in a structured repayment plan. She hated it. The first time she showed up to a family gathering without a new outfit, my mother made a point of saying Brooke had been forced to sacrifice. Aunt Lila replied, That is usually what happens when you owe money. My father became quieter around relatives. He had spent years hiding behind phrases like keep the peace and be the mature one. Once everyone saw the messages, those phrases sounded less like wisdom and more like what they were: permission for him to avoid doing the right thing. Some relatives changed their behavior toward me. A few apologized directly. Others became careful, which was almost better. They stopped assuming my mother's version was the complete one. Not everyone sided with me. 2 older family members still believed I had gone too far at brunch. One said family finances should never be printed and passed around a table. Another said my parents had been wrong, but that exposing Brooke's debt would follow her for years. I understand that argument. I don't feel guilty about my decision. My mother had already told everyone I was greedy, vindictive, and controlled by my fiancé. I had the right to defend myself with evidence. I didn't post Brooke's debt online. I didn't contact her friends or employer. I showed the people who had been invited to judge me the information they were missing. The wedding changed. Jonah and I reviewed our budget at the same kitchen table where I had canceled the autopays. We cut the guest list. We changed the flower order and replaced elaborate centerpieces with simpler arrangements. The florist sent a revised invoice that made me feel relieved instead of disappointed. We chose fewer menu options. We dropped several extras that had sounded important when we thought my parents were contributing. We paid the remaining deposit ourselves. There was something unexpectedly calming about knowing every dollar was ours and every decision belonged to us. No promises. No leverage. No family member could threaten to withdraw money because they disliked a seating chart or wanted Brooke included in something. My mother eventually sent a private apology, but it was not the apology I requested. She wrote, I'm sorry the dinner became upsetting and that you felt blindsided. I replied, I did not feel blindsided. You plan to blindside me. Please try again when you are ready to acknowledge that. She didn't answer. My father called Jonah once. He said, I hope you understand we were under a lot of pressure, Jonah replied. I understand you put that pressure on Taylor. My father ended the call soon after. Neither of them corrected the story publicly. They told a few relatives there had been miscommunication, but they didn't admit they had planned the announcement or expected me to keep paying their bills. So I didn't put their names on the final guest list. That decision hurt. It didn't hurt because I doubted it. It hurt because some part of me had always believed there would be a moment when my parents chose me without being forced. I thought my wedding might be that moment. Instead, they used my engagement dinner to prove the opposite. Aunt Lila will be at the wedding. Paige will be there too. Brooke will not. She has made 2 small payments toward what she owes me, but she still sends messages every few weeks about how badly I handled everything. I don't argue with her. I send a screenshot of the payment agreement and remind her of the next due date. My parents are not completely out of my life. They receive basic updates. I answer occasional calls. I am polite at larger family gatherings. But they no longer have access to my bank account, my calendar, my wedding decisions, or the private parts of my life they used to turn into leverage. The last time my mother asked whether we could put all this money nonsense behind us, I said, the money was never the whole problem. She asked, then what was? I told her, you didn't ask me to help Brooke. You decided I would. You didn't tell me privately. You used a room full of people to keep me quiet. And you were still taking money from me, while explaining that I didn't deserve support. She had no answer. For years, being called responsible felt like the closest thing I had to being valued by my family. Now I understand that they often meant useful. I am still responsible. I pay my bills. I keep records. I think before I act. I don't scream in restaurants or destroy property or make threats. But I no longer use responsibility as an excuse to accept disrespect. Jonah and I are having a smaller wedding than we first planned. The flowers will be simpler. The room will have fewer people. There will be no speech from my mother about family sacrifice and no quiet warning from my father to let something go. Every person there will know they were invited because we wanted them, not because someone paid for the privilege of controlling us. My parents called me selfish for closing my wallet. I call it refusing to finance a system that humiliates me. I didn't lose my family over a wedding fund. I lost the illusion that I ever had the same place in it. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.